Welcome to the latest episode of FiftyForward Exchange, a video series produced by Nashville nonprofit FiftyForward. The goal of FiftyForward Exchange is to discuss ideas or topics that are important to the older adult community. I am Sharie Loik Goodman, the director of the Patricia Hart Building. Thanks for joining us today. Well, today we are very excited to welcome our guest, Dianne Oliver, Executive Director of the West End Home Foundation. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Sharie. I'm so happy to be here this morning.
And we are so happy you're here today, Dianne. We've all heard of the West End Foundation if you're a nonprofit or you're trying to do good things here in the world in Nashville. Would you just tell us a little bit about the West End Home Foundation?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, I'm sure many of your viewers who've lived in Nashville for a number of years have heard of the old women's home, the West End Home for Ladies. And we provided residential care for elderly women through those homes, a series of homes over a period of about 122 years. We served over 500 elderly women. And in 2013, we transitioned to a private charitable foundation, the West End Home Foundation. And our mission is to enrich the lives of older adults, both men and women. And we do that through grant making. We provide grants to around 35 nonprofit agencies that serve older adults. FiftyForward is one of our longstanding partners. We're also getting more and more involved in advocacy, trying to be a voice for the issues impacting older adults and raise awareness in the community.
Wow, that's fantastic. We are so fortunate in the Nashville community to have an organization like West End Home Foundation. We want to just thank you for being there for so many of us. So we're speaking of older adults, so let's just jump right in here.
Okay.
This last year has been a year of growth for so many. You've been working with older adults for a while. Do you think older adults as a group in our society today tends to be overlooked?
Yes, that is a great question, and I could spend the whole day talking about this. But yes, older adults are definitely overlooked and very undervalued in our society. And this became increasingly clear during the pandemic. Older adults represented a disproportionate number of the deaths from COVID, largely in nursing homes, but 85% of the deaths were people over the age of 65. Nursing homes did not have access to PPE and the essentials that they needed to keep residents and staff safe. And, I'd read articles in the paper that said, well, the pandemic, kind of diminishing the impact of the pandemic because it was just mostly impacting older adults. And I'm sorry, I feel like we really failed the older adult population during that time. So I think that really underscored how we overlook it. Clearly, beyond the pandemic, it's not given the priority that's needed. Services for older adults and engaging older adults in meaningful ways. I think a good example of that is, I'm part of the philanthropic world, and the statistic is that only 2% of philanthropic dollars nationally are dedicated to aging-specific projects. Compare that 2% with people age 65 and over are soon becoming 20% of our population. So it's definitely overlooked.
It seems that, as you said, the pandemic brought so much to light that was actually already there.
Yes.
But now we have a chance just to let people know through this exchange conversation, as well as to let them know they're supported. They have a support system. They have people that are there for them if they experience ageism. And as we move forward, one of the questions I've had about this is, how does ageism actually impact the older adult?
Okay, another great question. There are a number of different layers to that. I think, the first ties back to my 2% figure. older adults aren't given priority consideration in funding of services and resources that are needed to support them, whether it's long-term care, whether it's community-based services, other supportive services. So, you know, I consider that a form of ageism, that we aren't, again, placing the kind of value on that segment of the population that we should. You know, I think older adults are just typically undervalued. And there's this sense of kind of doom and destruction, you know, terms like the silver tsunami. You know, the big wave's going to come and wipe out society because we're getting old in the grain of America. And the other one that just really gets, as a baby boomer, that just gets under my skin is the okay boomer, that is kind of making fun of people of our age that may, for example, have issues with their cell phones. It's like, well, okay, boomer, you know, what do you expect? And I think those are all just such prevalent forms of ageism. And, you know, I would say ageism is the only ism that is still widely acceptable and not viewed as politically incorrect. And we need to change that.
That can really stop people from planning maybe 20 or 30 years of their life if they're affected by that.
It can. It can have devastating effects, both emotionally and also, you know, from a health standpoint. You know, there's been a real focus on age-friendly health care because there aren't enough geriatricians, professionals who really understand the unique issues impacting people as they age. And so symptoms and concerns are often discounted. Oh, it's just, you know, it's just your age, but often are very treatable diseases. So this ageism can have some really serious consequences for people.
So we have health consequences, we might have job consequences. Many people are having to go back into the marketplace, especially after the pandemic. They've lost their jobs, or maybe there's been downsizing of some type. Socially, are people getting invitations anymore? I just think of the depth of what you're talking about, that it's just a whole person that is affected by this. And we have this valuable resource in those 50 plus that can bring so much wisdom and ideas into our world. So I really think what you're saying is very fascinating, something we really need to think about and talk about, because the work we do with older adults, we need to help people learn to possibly encourage others. Not just us, because we have looked into this, but others that could recognize this ageism in their thinking, maybe in their environments, the places they have influence over in our world, and bring these topics to the forefront to educate those around us. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's really there's great news on the horizon. There are some really significant initiatives gaining momentum nationally. The first one that our foundation has been involved with since 2019 is called the Reframing Aging initiative. And it's a national initiative that really seeks to change the conversation around growing older, diffusing the negative stereotypes, and really talking about older adults in a more positive light and how to keep them engaged in meaningful ways that matter and have value in our, you know, and kind of change that whole notion of value in our communities. So we're real excited about that. A lot of it is messaging, but just the messaging kind of can lead to a culture shift. And, you know, that's the ultimate goal, that we can kind of change the culture and how we view aging and eliminate those stereotypes. There's also national movement around creating age-friendly communities. AARP has been very involved in that, so that policymakers take into account older adults when they're building parks, when they're creating community space so that they're accessible and have the right lighting and can really keep those people engaged. There's also a lot of work being done nationally around age-friendly communities, and AARP has been a driver in that. And it's, creating plans, long-term plans for communities that make communities safe and accessible for people as they age, so that it breaks down barriers to full participation. So that's very exciting. And then the other one that we're seeing here at Vanderbilt University Medical Center is the age-friendly healthcare system, to where you're really training a multidisciplinary team to understand, the issues, various dementia, the medication issues that older adults have, so that they get better quality health care when they're in the hospital. And the final thing I'd really like to share, and you may have seen this, Sharie, the Forbes magazine, first ever 50 over 50. It's come out this week, but they are spotlighting 50 women over the age of 50 who have made significant contributions later in life, and many of the women that they're profiling are over the age of well into their 80s. So again, I think we're seeing some shifts, and I think we're starting to see people realizing the incredible impact that older adults are having on our world today.
There's many paths to aging, and it's not just one stereotype.
No.
And I think that's what I'm hearing you saying, that we need to rethink. We just need to rethink this population that is a part of our community, part of our families, and we need to change our language, which I loved when you said that, to change our language and think what we might say about ourselves or others, and look at this idea like more of a growth mindset.
Yes.
A way to learn and grow as our world changes, with having so many more older adults in our population, and how we can really be a community and build those relationships across that intergenerational spectrum.
Yes.
Of what we have in our community. So when we have experienced or observed ageism, what positive things can we all do when we have encountered this in our lives or see it in the lives of others?
I think the first thing we have to do is quit being afraid to speak up and say that just isn't right. Mm-hmm. I think we also, there are avenues to report ageism in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And if you're participating in structured community activities, I think, you do have channels to say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm experiencing. And I think we all have a responsibility, again, to just be inclusive and be respectful. It used to be that in many societies, the elders are the most revered people in that society. They're respected for their wisdom, they're looked to for guidance, and we need to get back to that here and really take advantage of the wisdom that older adults bring. The other thing I want to point out is just the incredible resource that, and you mentioned this earlier, that older adults offer. They're really one of our country's most valuable resource now, because they're the ones that are volunteering. We saw what happened when the pandemic hit and the 65 plus just shut down all activity immediately. Nonprofit agencies were hit so hard, and we surveyed our agencies, and really the range was 60 to 75% of volunteers at our funded agencies are over the age of 60. So an incredible, valuable resource. They're raising grandchildren. They're doing so much to support our communities.
They really are, and having raised children in the community and having contributed earlier in life, I just think they deserve that respect and dignity as well as value. I just think that as we move forward in our society, these kind of discussions, these kind of conversations, we can have these in our home. We can have these in our businesses. I love that they're having it on a national and community level. I mean, that's the support we have But as individuals, it's so great to think about everything you've said today and think, how could I talk about that when I am in my workplace, when I am with my family, when I am in my social groups? Because I think that grassroots effort of being able to uplift those that are aging is so very important, and everybody can have a part in that as well.
They can, and I'd like to go back to it. You mentioned intergenerational earlier, and that's one of the trends we're seeing in the aging field, and as funders, that there's a lot more emphasis being placed on intergenerational programming, bringing young people and old people together. And I'll tell you that we're seeing such great success in diffusing stereotypes, and I think there's ageism in both directions. I have a millennial, and she feels like she experiences ageism, and so I think by all of us, participating in activities together and coming together, that's going to break down a lot of it as well.
I love that, because it's really true when we get in relationships and we really get up close. It's really hard to judge, and it's really hard to use the language we once used when we care about people.
Yeah.
So I just love that thought. Well, thank you, Dianne, for joining us today. And I want to thank you all for watching this episode of 50forward Exchange. We hope you can exchange these thoughts and ideas and turn them into actions.